Hello everyone, how are you? Today I'm going to talk about a city where I lived for 5 years, a cold city in winter and expensive all year round, Montevideo. The Uruguayan capital is preparing for the future with a series of projects that aim to position it as a new logistics reference in the region. But before talking specifically about Montevideo, let's talk about Rotterdam, so you don't feel so betrayed by the title of this video. Oh, and I remind you that these parts are now going to be narrated by a synthetic voice. I hope you like it, at least it helps me a lot. So let's go with the video. First things first, Rotterdam is one of the largest and busiest ports in the world. In fact, it is the third busiest port in the world, just behind Singapore and Shanghai. It has more than 42 kilometers of docks, covering an area of more than 105 square kilometers. And every year it handles more than 8 billion tons of merchandise. Simply put, when we talk about Rotterdam, we are talking about a world-class port. But why am I talking to you about Rotterdam, a city that you probably didn't even know about? It's pretty simple. Like Montevideo, Rotterdam is located at the gates of two important rivers in its respective continent, the Rhine and the Mosa in Europe, and the Uruguay River and the Parana in South America. In addition, Rotterdam is located in the Netherlands, a small country nestled between the two European giants, France and Germany. While Montevideo is the capital of Uruguay, a country nestled between the two South American giants, Argentina and Brazil. And even though relations in Mercosur between Argentina and Brazil are not always the best, in Europe it's the opposite. France and Germany have learned, after many wars, that the best thing they can do for the prosperity and progress of their continent is cooperate. In this way, Rotterdam, strategically located on the North Sea and at the entrance to the Rhine waterway, which gives access to the interior of the European continent, has become the Europort, that is, the port of the European Union. This has been very good for the Dutch, who, despite their size as a country, have been able to take advantage of this particular geographic situation to position themselves as one of the wealthiest and richest countries within the Union. And although it is evident that the South American case has many differences, Montevideo is betting on becoming the Rotterdam of America, and for that it is preparing for the reception of new generation megaships. Through the Terminal Cuenca del Plata Company, composed of 80% by Cato Nati and 20% by the National Port Administration, the expansion of the current container beach by 22 hectares is planned, in addition to the construction of a second dock of 730 meters long, which will give rise to 2 new docking positions for larger ships. The expansion works of the terminal are also accompanied by the dredging of the access channel to the port to 14 meters deep, which allows the arrival of larger vessels. The goal of Montevideo is to improve its competitiveness as a logistics node and be a regional distribution center. To achieve this, in addition to the Cuenca del Plata works, Montevideo has been working on improving access to the port for other means of transport. To start, in 2022 the UPM Cellulose Specialized Terminal was inaugurated next to the old AFE Central train station, a work that comes hand in hand with the Central Railroad project, which, if you didn't know, I have a video where I explain better what it consists of. In short, UPM, the main pulp company, wants to take production from its new plant in Paso de los Toros to its new cellulose specialized terminal at the port, and to do so it plans to revive the railway between Paso de los Toros and Montevideo, since the railway modal is the best of all when we talk about land transport of commodities. On the other hand, to improve road access, a 2-kilometer viaduct is being built on the Port Boulevard for trucks, separating heavy traffic from light traffic, and offering more efficient entrances for bulk cargo and the container terminal. The work, which will cost around $140 million and is expected to be completed in 2023, also aims to become one of the most eye-catching symbols of Montevideo, as the work includes a hanging bridge of more than 1,200 tons. A real postcard over the bay. And finally, this has nothing to do with transport, but further north, in the Capurro area, a new fishing port is being built for foreign fishing vessels. The work consists of a 1,000-meter dock with the capacity to receive 50 ships. This new port is expected to be operational by April 2023. I'll tell you, this bay is the center of the universe here in Uruguay. But despite all the works around the port, it sounds very nice. The truth is that not everything is rosy, and for that we are going to see the history retrospectively. The history of Montevideo is somewhat particular, given that before it was even a city, it was already a port. Since the Portuguese founded the colony of Sacramento, they sought to settle in the Rio de la Plata. And when they saw that there was a natural bay to the east where a new city could be formed, they tried to establish themselves in 1723. But as quickly as they had arrived, they were expelled by the Spaniards from Buenos Aires. To prevent the Portuguese from settling there, they would have to be the ones who founded that city. The point is that the place chosen by the Portuguese was simply ideal. The site had a circular, deep, wind-protected bay, very close to the entrance channel to the Rio de la Plata. To the west of the bay there is a hill where a fortress was built taking advantage of the elevated ground. And on its eastern shore, an ideal point where to place a fortified port city, thanks to the fact that most of its perimeter was surrounded by water. It was exposed to land on a minimal part of its perimeter, where formidable walls and a fortress were arranged. I know that in Montevideo it won the title of the Troy of the New World, but it's just that these geographic conditions remind me a lot of Constantinople, really a lot. In short, in the following years Montevideo has a very strong rivalry with Buenos Aires, a rivalry known as the Port Fight. Briefly summarized, both cities aimed, as far as possible, to position themselves as the reference port for the entire southern region of the continent. The idea was simple, to capture as many raw materials as possible from the interior provinces for export, while being the point of entry and distribution of imports from the Viceroyalty. Although this rivalry has its episodes in history, it is briefly summarized that it was not settled, between quotation marks, until the independence of Argentina and Uruguay. But without going into details, from the independence of Uruguay until the 90s, the port of Montevideo had a fully public administration. But in '92 the new port law, which sought to boost Montevideo as a competitive regional port, allowed for the free circulation of goods within the port, eliminated bureaucracy and formalities, and promoted the association between public and private sectors, opening the doors to offer port services, in addition to granting concessions for the construction of works to modernize port infrastructure. In fact, it was during these years that Terminal Cuenca del Plata was installed, with 80% participation from Cato Nady and 20% from the National Port Administration. Since then, Cato Nady has been granted the exploitation of the specialized terminal for 30 years, but during the government of Tabar Vázquez, this company filed a lawsuit against the Uruguayan state for $1.5 billion, since it understood that Montecan was being favored. However, with the new government of Luis Lacalle, the Uruguayan state reached an agreement with the Belgian company, under which it not only abandoned its litigation for $1.5 billion, but also invested $500 million to modernize and expand the container terminal, in addition to granting discounts of between 20% and 30% of its rates. Of course, an investment from Cato Nady is not free. In exchange for its investment, the Uruguayan state has had to grant the privilege of operating the container terminal for 50 years, until 2081. On the other hand, this agreement has caused a bombshell for the main rival of the Belgian company, Montecan, which has rejected this contract as a monopoly that the state has given to its main rival, undermining free competition, and is currently considering the possibility of making a claim against the state, as the de facto monopoly of Cato Nady violates the same 1992 ports law, which establishes free competition. The government has also polarized on this issue, with the coalition government led by President Lacalle defending this agreement as reasonable and avoiding the demand of the Belgian company.
Ustedes saben que nuestro país estaba por enfrentar un juicio inminente de 1.500 millones de dólares en la terminal Cuenca del Plata. Cerró un acuerdo con Cato Nady que no solo desiste del juicio, sino que además se compromete a invertir 460 millones de dólares, además de proceder a una rebaja importante en lo que hace a las tarifas.
while the Frente Amplio has strongly questioned it as a surrender of national sovereignty, creating an unconstitutional monopoly as it was created by decree and a law with special majorities would be needed for this purpose.
El puerto está asociado a nuestra historia y este acuerdo ata la política portuaria del país de pies y manos. Este acuerdo es un acto de entrega de la soberanía nacional.
It is true that this issue has its legal, political, and economic facets, but what is an imminent reality are the great changes that are taking place in maritime transport at this precise moment. Did you know that the main shipping companies are betting on building mega ships? And when I talk about mega, I mean a proportion never seen before. The latest generation of mega cargo ships can measure more than 400 m long, something like 4 soccer fields, and can reach a height of over 80 meters, that's higher than the Statue of Liberty. In terms of cargo volume, they can transport more than 20,000 containers in one trip. The reason why these monsters are being built is very simple: if they can transport more goods they can save many economies of scale, are more fuel efficient and reduce rates. This improves the competitiveness of the sector. The problem is that not all ports are equipped to receive this new generation of ships. You need at least a depth of 15 to 17 meters for docking, cranes of at least 26 meters high. And with these conditions, there are simply only a handful of ports in the world that meet the requirements to receive these mega carriers. In fact, it is intended that there be only a handful of ports capable of receiving 1 or 2 maximum per continent where the mega carriers will arrive, and that from these ports a regional distribution is achieved, assigning the loads to smaller carriers so that they distribute the containers to secondary ports. And in that sense, Montevideo wants to prepare to make the port of the South Atlantic and become the center of cargo distribution in the region, either to the Argentine and Brazilian ports on the Atlantic coast, or to the interior of the continent through the waterways of the Plate Basin. In summary, the situation surrounding the port of Montevideo is complex. There is a dispute between companies and politicians over the administration of the port, each with their own arguments. At the same time, there is a need for the Uruguay to prepare for the changes taking place in the shipping industry to keep its main port relevant. There are also questions about the concessions given to Cato Nady and whether Montevideo can become the reference port for the Mercosur region. The opinions on these issues vary, and it will be important to consider all perspectives and carefully evaluate the options available to ensure the best outcome for the country. Here, I leave the opinions to you. Put me below in the comments. What do you say about all this? Are the concessions given to Cato Nady okay? Can Montevideo be the reference port of Mercosur? I read you under the comments, and if you liked the video do not forget to comment, subscribe, and give it a thumb up. I am that, now I am Sin-Tesis, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye.